Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alliance of Independent Authors Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joe, and hello, everyone.
Yes,
Good
we
to
are
be,
back.
good to
We're
be
back.
back. Good to be back.
We
Yes.
are back, and this is going to be a more personal episode, and we are talking about stepping back to step forwards. So we will be getting into that topic in a minute. But before we do, Orna, is there any news from ALLi that everyone should know?
Well, yes, I mean, this is the time of year where we begin to ramp back up again, and we have some events coming up. Some of our big annual online 24-hour extravaganza, Self-Pub is happening at the end of October, last weekend of October. So we're in big prep mode for that. And if anybody would like to sign up and register for the 3 free days, that's at selfpublishingadviceconference.com. And we also have an exciting live event, actual physical event, the first since COVID with Amazon KDP. So it's going to be London based, this one, and it's on the 13th of October. Again, free to register, but all the information will be going out in our regular member email tomorrow about how to register for that. It's first come, first served. It will be a limited number of places, but we hope that we get as many members as possible into that room, and lots of opportunity for talking to the Amazon team and finding out more. And it will be a session that's geared towards those who were kind of beyond the basics on KDP. So it's not about setting up your book or anything like that, but much more about how to reach more readers and drive more sales on the platform. And then the other thing, I suppose, is this podcast. Here we are having our live session. We have done a bit of an upgrade on the podcast so that we are now twice weekly. We have advice sessions on Fridays, inspirations on Sundays, and then a few of the advice sessions are like this one, also go out in video on our YouTube channel and Twitter and Facebook. So yeah, we've added some new sessions on the Sunday where I'm going to be talking about creative self-publishing more from a kind of a profitable publishing perspective. So we put out a lot of education, as everybody knows, in ALLi, but this is more about kind of tying it all together so that people can see some kind of return on investment. And we've new presenters. Melissa Addy has joined us, and she's part of the team now. Dan Parsons joined us a little while ago. So yeah, there's lots happening, and would encourage people who like listening to podcasts to subscribe on their podcast
Whatever player you
platform.
listen
Yeah,
to.
whatever player you love. Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, let's get into the topic for today, which is stepping back to step forwards. And we have both had a few months away. And we're going to talk about why we needed to step away and why you might consider doing this for yourselves. This is the advanced salon. And look, let's face it. Also, we don't want to have any shame around taking time out or even stopping writing for a while. Like, people step away for sometimes years at a time, they come back. So what we want to do is really talk about why we needed some time away, and also how to do it, because let's face it, we're all so busy, and then how we are stepping forward, having reflected on that. So let's start, Orna, by talking about why did you, because we're going to get a bit personal in this episode, why did you need to step away a few months back?
Yeah, so just defining what I mean. So stepping away can mean so many different things, and you can step away completely and just shut everything down and go off onto a desert island and just only write, or it can be more sort of just creating some space. And for me, it was more that. It wasn't that I needed to completely wrap up and go. I am here in a hotel room at the end of a creative writing getaway, but that's not really the nature of what I was doing here over this past time. So we stopped the podcast for a while. We wanted to get some feedback from people on the podcast, but also it was that sort of every weakness of it. We knew there were some changes that we needed to do, and I just needed the time to to kind of process exactly what was going on and look forward to decide what we wanted to, how we wanted that upgrade to look and to feel and so on. So I tend to think more in terms of creative rest, and creative rest being built in and being very much part of our process,
Mm.
and rather than kind of being forced to take time out through burnout, to actually planning for creative rest regularly every day, as well as in the week, the month, the quarter, or whatever. So for me, it was a few months back, just after our 10-year celebrations. My plan was that I was going to, we've a very good team set up in ALLi now, and it was time for me to return to my fiction and begin to go more deeply into that and to create time and space for that in my schedule. It, but it didn't prove easy. And that's really why I needed to kind of step away, because I needed to create a scenario whereby the habit energies that were built up over 10 years of dealing with, constant emails and behaving in certain ways, and, how I would time my day and all of those kinds of things. I needed to really reflect on that and make sure that I was using my time in the most effective way possible. And so that was really why I stepped back. Do you want to talk about why you stepped back?
Well, first of all, I think like you mentioned a few things there, constant emails, and someone actually put in an email back to me recently about how I'd used the word grind in, yeah, and I was like, "Ooh," but I want us to bring that up because you mentioned their constant emails, and let's face it, we all do have to email as part of the job of being an author, and in fact, one of the things that if you're a new author, you should be building up your email list, so while we're encouraging you to do this. But there's also, like you said about this podcast, you and I, we're really good friends, and we've been doing this for years, and yet we both said, do we need to carry on this show between you and I? Like, just to be honest to everyone listening, we were like, has this turned into something that we need to not do anymore? And also, I think you mentioned when writing feels like a chore, there's something wrong. And when a podcast feels like a chore, we need to question what's going on, because actually our voices and our visual self portray a certain energy, and people can pick up on that. So if you're feeling that sort of that things are a grind, then seriously, you need to be having a look at it. So I had already planned my pilgrimage. So I've just got back from the Camino de Santiago. I walked the Portuguese coastal route. So 2 weeks, 300 kilometers, carrying my backpack. And so I had that in the calendar. That was it's a life goal. It's been something I've had planned. Well, not planned. I had wanted to do for decades. And then when I was really sick with COVID and could barely walk to the toilet, I was like, I need to do that walk to prove something to myself. So I had planned this, but also it kind of coincided with 11 years full time, feeling just burned out by a lot of different things. And so for me, I needed the space to really think about what I wanted to do. And in order to do the trip away, we'll talk about the planning in a minute, but I almost cleared the decks beforehand. So we stopped this podcast in June, I think it was. And so I didn't walk until September. So we had some time to really think about it. So yeah, and also just to say, time out doesn't need to be a holiday, and walking this pilgrimage was certainly not a holiday. It was really, really hard, but it's almost like you mentioned creative rest. I wouldn't use the word rest either for pilgrimage, but I didn't do anything. I'd hardly even read. I haven't listened to a podcast in months. I haven't been inputting. I guess that's the point.
Yes, and I do think that technically that is creative rest, because it's really about rest for the mind, not the body.
Mm,
And I think that's the thing that can happen if you are like I was, in the habit of working within a job. I was able to manage short form, so writing poetry and nonfiction, longer form. But when it came to combining ALLi, longer fiction, long form, and fiction, long form, it broke. It didn't. It was just too much. It wasn't. It didn't fit. It didn't work, and it didn't. I constantly felt like I wasn't really doing any of them very well.
Mm.
So that was what kind of led me to realize. But it wasn't a holiday for me either. I did have a holiday, but that was completely separate. That was just going away with my family. For me, it was more about just clearing the decks within my day's work so that I got that space. So again, it's the enough time and space in the schedule to go deep, because fiction requires me to do that in a different way to either poetry or nonfiction, and to have time to get into creative flow, I suppose, and which to me is about quieting the mind and letting, moving into a whole other world of fictional made up people who are doing, who are leading me, and I'm kind of there, opening up to it.
Mm.
So there was no point in me taking a month off to finish a novel, and crashing it for those weeks, and then coming back and being in the same. What I needed same situation. What I needed to do was set up new habits, new ways of approaching my day, new ways of approaching my week, new ways of approaching my month, and it was in kind of planning that out quite carefully that, yeah, I found the space and I found the freedom to actually do it. So I don't think it's quite fully refined yet, but
Mm.
I'm happy to just keep going with it now. I don't feel the need to clear the decks, and we are back to events and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like it's stepping out of the data stream or getting off the conveyor belt, or when I talked with you about it, it's like jumping out of the river of everything that carries on all the time. Because what it can often feel like in our, not just our author lives, in life in general, it's like these are the things that happen, that have to happen, and we're just moving and moving and moving, and everything carries us forward. And it's like we need that time to jump out on the bank of the river. Or for me, like, really, I consume so much content normally, and it revs my brain up to this sort of high pace. And I am, one of my strengths, Clifton's strengths, is input, and I need input in order to write, in order to podcast. So I need all of that. But at some point, it's like an engine. It needs some rest, complete rest. And I almost feel like now I'm back. I've jumped back in the river. I've jumped back in the data stream. But also, it's given me more perspective, as in, before I stopped and had a break, everything seems so important all the time. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels like we have to do it and do it now, or we're going to miss out. And when you go away and you take a step back, it can really help you get perspective over what actually is important. And like for me, one of the things that happened, obviously I was walking, but the Queen died. And regardless of anyone's feelings about the Queen, what was interesting was seeing the pictures of her as a young woman, as a middle-aged woman, as an old woman, of seeing what she's achieved and seeing the historical things that happened while she was alive. And it just makes you think, yeah, this river of life, it keeps moving, and that's all of us. And you have to get some perspective. Like, what do you want to do? So as we're talking, people listening, think about your own life and that stream, and whether you need to jump out occasionally.
Absolutely, because the work that we do as writers requires us to go deep. And if there's too much input or just too much busyness, too much activity, too much front mind, then we're not doing our best work. It really is that simple. I mean, half an hour in creative flow can produce better, more important, more resonant work than half a week where you're
Mm.
in the grind, as you described it. There is an incredible power in flow, and being in flow. It's a state, it's a condition that you have to kind of get yourself into. You have to consciously go there, so that the unconscious and subconscious, that's the kind of mystery of it. And if it's actually impossible to be there if you are, and I think, just like we said earlier, a good indication of whether you are in need of some creative rest or to take a break is things have started to feel like a chore. And I think the other one is everything starts to feel equally important. What you just said there. So
Mm.
it's another good indicator, because the thing is, often when you most need a break is when you least feel like taking one.
Yeah, because
So
you're too busy to take a break.
too busy, the indie authors cry, always. So yeah, you're too busy, and so we need these indicators where we can actually kind of step back and look at our behaviors as opposed to what our mind is telling us we should be doing. Another great indicator is if life is full of shoulds
Mm.
instead of I want tos.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one in a
Of
minute.
course.
But I mean, this is, you said there's it's about being, we're also busy. There's so much to do, not just with the author life, but with the rest of life. So how do we actually take time off? How do we make a space for it? How have you managed to get this space? Is it literally just what we did, which was let's just stop, like turn off the podcast for a couple of months, or in my case with the Creative Pen, I've not missed a week for years, and I had what 3 weeks where I didn't podcast, and that was huge for me, huge, you know.
Sure, absolutely. But yeah, I do think planning it is the way to do it. And, this whole idea of if you break your year down into quarters or whatever, making sure that in each quarter there is space for creative rest, also planning it in your day, your week, and so on. I didn't, I had to plan to stop as well. If you don't plan, the fact is that life will come along and do it for you, because you'll get sick, you'll burn out, you'll just cease being able to produce. So it's much, much better. I mean, I see a lot of authors in the indie community who do reach that burnout place and have to stop. It's far, far better for you to take control and build that rest in.
Yeah, and I think in terms of, well, obviously I had a journey, which was and I had to fly, and there was accommodation. I've been training physically. I've put in a lot of hours physical training to do the walk. So there was that planning. But then in terms of the work, like I said, I essentially exchanged income as well. That's another thing that, since this is the advanced salon, for me to turn off my business for 3 weeks, this is why I haven't done it before. Like, I usually even work most weekends. I rarely will leave the business for as long as I just did. Now, I had my phone and I checked my email once a day, and I posted on Instagram and Twitter some photos once a day, but I was pretty blooming good about not doing anything. I also, as I said, paused the podcast. Alexandra, my wonderful assistant, dealt with anything that I couldn't deal with, and I had an autoresponder that I put everywhere. And this is, you're allowed to do that. So and I'm saying that for my benefit and for everyone listening. If you feel like but I can't do that, well, you have to at some point. And now what's so crazy is I feel like, why haven't I done as long a break before? People said they missed the podcast, but then maybe that's great. And maybe this show too. People, if you go away for a few weeks, then people appreciate it in the same way that by taking time off, I appreciated what I have. So yeah, this kind of, how do people frame that? Like, how can they frame the loss of income? For example, the people who are writing a book a month, if they don't write a book that month, they lose that book, or you lose a month of writing or whatever it is. So how can people make that decision?
I think, we have to realize it goes back to what we were saying earlier about the power of your own creative responses and abilities and capacities, and how they are nurtured and fed by the rest. So you have to kind of switch off that panicking money mind that's saying, I'm going to lose a month's income, and realize that by taking that month, as an example, that you are actually going to produce a better book next time, or you're going to be able to produce more, or you would have stopped writing anyway. You have to understand that that's the thing. I think the second thing is we should set ourselves up as soon as possible to be able to take this time. And you
Mm.
mentioned Alexandra. I mean, team is absolutely essential. I couldn't take a break for a minute. I wouldn't be able to go to sleep at night if it wasn't for the team. Building a team that can help you to actually deliver more ROI is the way we need to start thinking about our businesses. So if you go into it where you think you have to do everything and you bootstrap completely and everything is all down to you, and you are still doing that some years, yes, at the very beginning, but if you're still doing that some years later and waiting for the day when you're going to be able to take a proper rest, or you're going to be able to build up a team. That's not how it works. You kind of have to take the reins and take the initiative and make it happen for yourself. And then you get the rewards of that. So that can be scary. That can be difficult and challenging. There's no doubt about it. But just grinding on is definitely not the optimal way to approach it.
And also, I feel like there's never a perfect time to do anything, and the reason I mean, I have literally thought about walking the Camino de Santiago since my late teens. So, 30 years pretty much. And yet I haven't done it. And the reason I haven't done it, even before I was an author, is because there was never the right time. And it was like one day, one day, one day. And what don't they say that about in the regrets of the dying, it's the thing that I said I wanted to do that I didn't do. And so I'm just really glad that I got over that, but it took COVID flooring me to finally do this. And I mean, maybe for people, it's not like you didn't go and achieve a life goal during our break, but you took. So what we're saying to people listening is it doesn't have to be a massive thing like what I did. It can just be step back, as you did. But you have to put these things in. And now, as you said, I'm really encouraged to start putting more time in. So you've said to me years ago now, you're not very good in December, Jo. And I was like, you're right. So now I'm trying and be really good about scheduling some time out in December because, but then January hits and I'm all guns blazing. But it's this, as you said, putting it in per quarter. And of course, as this goes out, we're moving into the final quarter of the year, right? So practically, if people want to do something this quarter, what should they do, or what could they do? No shoulds around here.
Yeah, no shoulds. Well, I would recommend, first of all, when I started planning, seriously planning my time, I found great liberation in that. And I'm not saying it's for everybody, but certainly it was for me. And as I got busier, it became more and more essential. But the kind of different thing about the way in which I did my planning was I actually plan for creative rest. So in my planner, there is actually a time set aside for creative rest on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. So obviously, daily, it can be just very short. On a weekly basis, it might be a meditation session or something like that. On a monthly basis, it might be a weekend away. On a quarterly basis, it might be something longer, some kind of retreat or something. It doesn't actually matter what it is. You're the best judge of what you need, and if you actually listen to yourself, you will be, you will tell yourself, the other part of yourself will be delighted to tell you what it needs. The important thing is to schedule it in, and then of course to do it, not just to write it down. And it can be incredibly challenging. I think that's the most important thing to kind of realize. Creative play is the same. That's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're definitely not going to go there on this one. But your busy mind will resist it. I think that's the important thing to realize. And you need to kind of get over that hump in order to go there. And even when you're there, you can find yourself checking your phone, and there are 1,000 ways in which you can distract yourself from rest. And it is a challenge, but it is necessary. So yeah, for me, it's all about planning it in, factoring it in.
Yeah, and like our writing sessions, planning in and then turning up for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also maybe getting out the house, I think, is another thing. Like I find this office where I'm recording this, I'm in my work office, you're in a hotel, but you're still working in that hotel. But I find if I'm away from this room, I can get away from a certain headset. I can't relax in this room. It's impossible. And this is one of the issues of working from home. I mean, my husband Jonathan, took a job in the pandemic, and he works upstairs, and it's very hard to move to working from home in a corporate job. And if you're also trying to write at home and you've got family and whatever people are facing, so if you can, then I would say get out the house would be another tip. I don't know, can you ever relax in your house?
Well, we actually moved work out. So Philip is the co-director of ALLi. We worked together on that, and obviously then I have my writing as well. So we actually have 3 spaces now: one for ALLi, one for Orna Ross, where she does her writing, and then home, where the rest happens. And that has been fantastic for us. That
That is
really
good.
was, yes, and that was after 10 years, after a decade. And so I didn't think of that move in terms of creative rest, but now I can actually see it. When we leave work, we leave it behind us and go home, and it's a switch off, and there's a walk between those 2 places. Whereas before it was a separate part of our house, but it was still in the house,
In the house.
and
Yeah.
it was completely different. Yeah.
Obviously everyone has to do what they can do, but even I find just going to a coffee shop, or some people go to the library or whatever it is, like it doesn't have to be a separate office or whatever. But yeah, okay, so that's a kind of roundup of what we did and how you might do it in terms of listening. So that's our step back. So let's now talk about stepping forward, because part of the reason to take a slightly longer thing, there's creative rest, which is almost like the restoration and just keeping you at the ability of where you are. But taking a slightly longer period, perhaps, and taking a step out almost, enables us to think more strategically. And because that daily grind, the daily email, the social media, all the stream can make us just be enmeshed in the minutiae of the writing, but also the author business stuff. So sometimes we need to step out to think about it. So, well, do you want to start? So, what are some of the things, like the big thing that you decided on your timeout?
So it wasn't even so much that I made a big decision, it was just that I made big shifts, and I consciously changed my practices. So in terms of, I used to give myself, 2 90-minute sessions was my writing time for the day, and in the morning, generally speaking. I've shifted so that I'm actually dividing up and giving some days to the busy work, and other complete days to the creative work, so that I can go deeper, because fiction requires me to do that. It worked fine when it was poetry, but it didn't work for fiction. So that's one very practical change. And in terms of then the actual writing sessions themselves as well, I just have more time around them. So just more time for meditation, and not even meditation, but kind of just not thinking and allowing, and back reconnecting with some practices that I kind of let slide, particularly doing a lot more free writing, a lot more writing by hand than I had been doing. So for me, it was more about redefining myself as well, just how I see myself, just, reminding myself I am a poet, I am a novelist, I'm not, but it's not just the day job, which is ALLi, that they're just strengthening that sense, I suppose. So yeah, it wasn't so much about doing things in the way that you did. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about walking the Camino. I mean, everyone says that's life changing, right?
Yeah, I know, this is a funny thing. And I would walk next to someone, whose partner had died and they were processing grief, or someone who wanted to quit their job and become a writer. Like literally, I met so many people like that. Or people trying to change their life. And I think what was gratifying is that I overwhelmingly sort of woke up every day going, I don't need to change my life. And that was actually really good. Sort of I'm happy, I'm grateful for what I've built. I'm grateful for the books that I've written. I'm grateful for the community, for the readers, for my friendships, with you and others. And it felt like just stepping away. I mean, sometimes obviously there's always niggly things that are annoying. We're gonna always have. There's always part of a job that is not amazing, whatever job you do, that in fact in life, right, or with a partner, or with this, just it's never going to be 100%. But the thing is getting that perspective around what is the work we want to do with our life. And I'm not saying I'm committing for the rest of it, but there were points in the last year, when I've thought maybe I should just get a job and write for the love of it and forget the business. Like, I don't even think I've admitted that out loud before, but it's like, wouldn't that be easier? Because I see with Jonathan, he finishes his job at like whatever it is, 5:30, 6:00, and then he's done. Like, there's no being on social media, there's no worrying about whether we've hit some list or getting up in the algorithm or all this stuff. And so, but anyway, the point is that I went away and I thought, okay, actually I don't need to change my life, hooray. So I'm doubling down on what I am best at. I think the other thing is, you and I have been doing this a long time. Like, you've been doing it a decade and I started about 4 years before you. And it's like, are we still being useful to the community as us in this guise? Fiction and poetry and everything is separate, but in this way, are we still useful? Do we still provide a valuable voice when there are so many voices now in the community? And so I came back and I'm doing a survey to my audience to kind of see what are the things that I can offer and that I can be useful around, and I want to do that. And also with my work, I want to come back on something you said earlier. You said more important work, which is a really interesting phrase, because I also felt that I want to write, important's a difficult word, but I want to write books that I feel touch people in a deeper way. So while, behind me I've got, how to market a book or whatever, yay, but I want to write more important books. And that's a really big topic. So, and again, no judgment to whatever we're writing. They can be fun, it can be crazy, it can be whatever. But what did you mean by doing more important work or writing more important books?
Well, I think important is one word, or we could use the word expansive or whatever. As you go on in this work, you can't stay in the same place. You either grow or you're pulling back, permanently. You're going in the other direction, or you're dropping your finishing, and that means that happens too. Not writing is possible. It is possible to live a life and not have to write, and never mind publish. But if we stay here and if this is what we do, and like you, I've completely committed to this work and all aspects of it. I don't want to drop ALLi, for example. I don't want to drop poetry just because I am writing fiction again. We want it all, and we have to find ways to do that. But we will keep expanding. We will keep deepening what we do. It's just inevitable. Otherwise, it's not possible. You're not engaging creatively. So to be a creative means to be expanding, growing, and growing in whatever direction we feel that is. So for you, obviously at the moment, it's this sense that you want to engage and write a slightly different kind of book, and that sounds like a sort of a writing craft development thing that has come out of your step back. And it's really important that we honor those impulses in ourselves, I think, because you do see creatives of all kinds, writers included, who get to a certain point, and then after that point they just keep repeating the same old, and they do lose readers, and they do lose impact and influence. And if we want to keep growing those things, then we have to follow those impulses that say, yeah, do something more important, do something deeper, do something higher, do something, it's good.
Yeah, and I mean, just to bring up Hilary Mantel, who died in the last week as we record this, and again, a terrible loss at I think she was 70, but she's been ill for a very long time. But her creative body of work is kind of just to an inspiration to someone like me and you who write all over the shop, because Hilary Mantel wrote all over the shop. Like, she's most known for being a historical novelist towards the end there, the Tudor books, Wolf Hall and the award winners, but she wrote like short stories, she wrote travel writing, she wrote just loads of different kinds of fiction as well. She wrote essays. She was scathing sometimes in some of her speeches, and she wrote through sickness. And in reflecting on her, I thought, and also she didn't make much money for many years as a writer. And then she hit some zeitgeist. I mean, you can write an amazing book like Wolf Hall and not win the Booker, but she hit something there and had incredible commercial success as well as critical success. But I feel like as a discovery writer, as a multi-passionate creative as we are, looking at other people's careers and saying, look, you might not know where things are going to go, but if your muse is sort of pushing you towards a certain area, then yeah. And I guess that's the other thing. I feel like I have to take a risk. Like my next book, which will be a pilgrimage book, will be / travel memoir / self-helpy / spiritual, and I'm secular as well, so it's not even a Christian book. It's got like a market that's about tiny. It's like a teaspoon size market, but who knows, it might be a book that helps me then write something else. So anyway,
or
yeah.
against all expectations, it might be your breakout book. I remember Ken Follett talking about his cathedral.
Oh yes,
Pillars of the Earth.
Pillars of the Earth. Yeah.
Yes, and he every agent told him, no, sorry, the publishers are not going to go near it. Nobody wanted it, but he did it for the love of it, and it broke him to a completely new level. Readers loved it. Yeah.
Well, and actually, you say that. I think that I was inspired to do the Camino because of Paulo Coelho's book Pilgrimage, like 30 years ago. So who knows? And I feel like this is what we have to think. So people listening, we just don't know. We don't know where our books don't lose value the week after publication. In fact, the ridiculous books that we don't know where they're going to fit in the market are the ones that might have some more longevity than the sort of like my How to Market a Book, whichever side it is. I either have to rewrite that because it's 4 years old now, or I have to let it go. So yeah. Okay, so we're chatting away here, but we did have a couple of smaller things that we thought would be more interesting also to share. So what's a smaller thing or a more businessy, strategic-y thing that you have thought?
So yeah, one of the things that became obvious as I stepped back and looked at everything was that there's an awful lot to be done. And one of the things that was happening to me was that when I was doing these longer fiction sessions, that when I came to doing, social and newsletters and stuff like that, it was difficult to actually turn around and do the words. So I'm going to use audio a lot more to get the words out and say the things. So that was, for example, why I decided to do the Creators of Publishing podcast rather than the original plan was that I was going to do a blog post each month. So decided, no, let's talk it through and then we can use the transcript to kind of base the ideas or whatever on. Also thinking about using audio more to communicate with people, with readers and with patrons and things like that in terms of just quick messaging. It's so much easier to just send a quick audio than it is to kind of sit and shape the words. So yeah, that's just a tiny kind of small thing. I'll let you know how it all goes.
But you also already use dictation for your email, don't you?
Yes, I do. I use dictation for email, but then I go back and I kind of
Check it.
edit it, what we're like. And so, yeah, if you just said it, if you just sent an audio message, then the editing bit doesn't necessarily need to happen, though maybe it does. It depends on how the audio goes, I guess.
How it goes, yeah. Well,
yeah.
just on that, I mean, there's loads of people are like, oh, but if I use audio, I have to pay for transcripts. And yeah, I mean, still the gold standard is human transcript, but there's Trint, there's Otter, there's Descript, and OpenAI just came out with Whisper, which everyone's going to build on, and it's meant to be the new, it only came out in the last few days. It's their latest product. It's basically AI transcription. And so the cost of transcription is just dropping and dropping and dropping. And we used to use things like Dragon, but I've been dictating just into Gmail and sending it to myself for book words as well, because the Google email AI transcription is really, really good.
I do that on my phone too, into Evernote. So yeah, there are lots and lots of ways to use audio, I think, to just get more done. And also just the naturalness of your voice sometimes is really good, in, particularly, reader communications rather than the highly scripted stuff. So
Stuff. Yeah, well,
yeah.
I think that's great. I mean, that's a more practical tip. And mine is something I'm not going to do. So hilariously, right, and I've said this for ages, I'm not going to do TikTok. And then hilariously, before I went, we were talking about this and several other people, and they, we all know it's all over the place. It's the number one thing in book marketing right now is TikTok. And some authors, Colleen Hoover, are doing, and not just Colleen, but lots of other people are doing really, really well with TikTok. And I was feeling like, oh, I'll do it. I will. I'm going to have to do it because it seems like the thing I have to do. And so I downloaded the app and I started looking at it. And the wonderful James Blatch has a whole thing on it. And I watched some of his things and I looked at Colleen Hoover's TikTok. And while I was away, I thought about it again. I was like, I hate it. I hate it, hate it, hate it. I hate looking at it. I'm like, this algorithm is like the worst of Facebook on steroids. I just can't get why the things that are popular. It's just not me. Plus, I don't want to do video. And like literally, I don't want to do video. I do video with you and I barely do it anywhere else. And so, so I was able, with a step back, to hear myself think about this and go, no, my content is long form, it's personal, it's words and audio and pictures. Like Instagram, I like putting pictures on Instagram. It's evergreen as much as possible rather than the ephemeral sort of, and also I think just getting away from what I don't want to do, like tapping into that feeling. Why do I want to step towards something I don't want to do, even if it might sell some more books? And it probably wouldn't for me because I wouldn't be able to do it properly or whatever. So what's your feeling? Because you were also flirting with TikTok.
Yes, somebody had convinced me and said they would, do it for me and I should be there and all the rest of it. And then I, again, in the step back, looked at everything and looked at it and decided I don't need another social medium. I need to do the ones I'm doing already better. And secondly, it's not my market, and I think that's the most important thing to realize. There may be a way, but the kind of publisher that I am and the kind of writer that I am, I just cannot see how it translates. So I dropped it all. So it was about a 5 minute, 5 minutes in, 5 minutes out. I didn't consider it seriously. But I think it's really, really important to match your social media with your actual book readers, with your readers, and make sure that you're, just because something is working really well for somebody else does not mean it's going to work for you.
But with your readers, but also your preferred way of doing
Absolutely.
stuff. So yes, we have to do marketing, but I have books and travel. I have 2 podcasts. We like podcasting. I like putting pictures on Instagram. There's things that I will do and enjoy doing. Yeah. And then we all have to think that. So if you're listening and you've been resisting it, or if you started doing these things and then you hate it, then just stop it. Just stop. You don't have to do it all. And then one last quick thing, I wanted to reflect on the fact that it's hilarious. You can go away and yet things don't change. So I talk about comparisonitis a lot. Like there's always someone in the author community who's doing better than you, who has more books, makes more money or whatever. And then there's always someone below you or, behind you who's just starting out and doesn't make any money. And it was the same on the pilgrimage. It was hilarious. I was like, that person's got a smaller pack. Of course, they're walking faster than me, or they only started in the town later and I've been walking further. And then someone comes fast and they've been walking from Lisbon. And I'm like, oh my goodness, the comparison is happening even on a pilgrimage is ridiculous. So I'm laughing at myself. And also the idea of finishing energy and pushing through energy. Starting is fine, like our books often, and like, ooh, shiny. And then there was a point where I was like, what the, am I doing? You know, I had blisters, I was in pain, what was the point? And I thought about just giving up and getting on a plane home because that would be much easier, or sitting in a bar and having a good time. And then I was like, no, pushing through energy, finishing energy, this is what we do. And both of those things sort of I just felt were a parallel to the writer's life.
It's great. Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
Good. So what is coming up in the next month? Because we're almost out of time.
Oh gosh, yeah. So for me, I'll be working on my novel. I have a workshop on Friday for patrons on selling more books this holiday season. And yeah, I got Self-Pub then around the corner, so that'll be me for the next month. What about you?
Well, we should just say Self-Pub.con. You can register at selfpublishingadviceconference.com.
Always good on the marketing. Thank you, Jo.
Yes, my brain is getting back. Yes, and I will be, well, first of all, I'm kind of processing my Camino. I've just put on Books and Travel like a ton of my photos and a sort of day-by-day breakdown and gear stuff. And then I'm preparing a solo episode. I'm getting back to speed with the J.F.Penn podcast. And then I'm also scheduling time for the pilgrimage book. And I'm getting back into the AI stuff as well. It's like the other side. There's a whole load of stuff going on right now around AI art and loads of stuff. So I feel like I'm jumping back into the stream with renewed enthusiasm for the next quarter. So we are now doing this on the last Tuesday of the month. 3 p.m. UK time on the last Tuesday of the month. You can watch us live or join in. And on the podcast, we'll be going out on Fridays. So that's where we will be. Anything else, Orna?
No, that's it for now. So yeah, just happy writing, everyone.
And happy publishing. We'll see you next time.
Bye.